Season 11 is making for one of the better season starts. Symmetra buffs, Cassidy reworks, and Sojourn nerfs, and some much needed rebalancing for tanks and supports. There's been a lot of things happening recently with the tank passive and armor changes and super overpowered spam brawl metacomps already. So let's get into the new DPS tier list for Season 11. If you're looking to rank up on your favorite heroes, check out the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can level up your game and help you get better, faster. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. With tons of changes headed our way, we're getting started in D tier, and first up is low tier mainstay Reaper. Despite 2 buffs this patch, he's just too stuck in his ways. The spread buff was intended to make him better at fighting backline and other DPS now that his damage into tank armor is so bad. But his overall spread was already so high ever since the start of Overwatch 2. Reducing the spread degree from 6.5 to 6 is only a 7.8% decrease. He still has to get extremely close to enemies to kill them with 1 shot less, because that's what actually matters, how fast he can kill enemies. No matter how good you are with Reaper, you're always on a timer when in the enemy team. There's just so many ways to peel him with his massive hitbox. He's not F tier because it's not abysmally bad, but even in Malga meta, he's not seeing playtime. He's been totally replaced by heroes who can actually break armor and get picks from range. Already moving up to C tier is Sombra. Whenever she's not hard meta, it's pretty hard to rank her. She's got a lot of potential, but overall she's got a decent niche. She can assassinate backline with hacks and virus burst damage, but her translocator is a big weakness. Even if you do manage to escape, you spend so much time outside of the fight that it can be won or lost without your input. Despite having such great utility and a top tier ultimate, her playstyle just doesn't fit with the average ranked team, and whenever she doesn't build EMP especially fast, she's limited to dive compositions, the hardest to coordinate in ranked. Damage heroes have all gotten so much better after Season 9, so you can still try your hand at her, but you'll have to do a lot of work to carry when you could just sit back and spam hard with the more reliable picks this season. Next in C tier is Bastion. 100 armor makes him surprisingly more viable than usual, but it's always tough being a massive hitbox DPS hero. His abilities are good, but when he's only strong during a 6-second duration with a 12-second cooldown, it's pretty easy to bait and kite his pressure, and that leaves you wide open to get collapsed on. The top tanks are really good right now, but without someone like Reinhardt protecting you, it's pretty easy to get triple angled and deleted. Now for B tier, starting with Torb. It's always really valuable to counter flankers, but Torb is a bit too committed to that playstyle, especially when there are A tier and S tier heroes that can do it even better while having more consistent damage and more lethal engages. But Torb's damage is at least consistent enough. He's got armor just like Bastion, so he won't be exploding instantly to tank engages, although he'll still get blown up from range by the top tier damage heroes. And although he can win DPS duels against flankers in close range, unfortunately for him, it's a heavy spam meta. Moving on to Widowmaker. If you can hit your shots, you can always make her work, but within reason. It's much safer to play her on a strong maps, because she still has just 200 HP. She can die super fast, and because you ideally scope in to hit awesome headshots, you can leave yourself open to unsuspecting bursts from literally every possible hero you can imagine. Some escort and hybrid maps are great for her, but when it comes to some game modes like Flashpoint and Control, there's just no way you can win with her without relying on the enemy team not counterpicking at all. But hey, headshots are headshots. 1 shot is all you need to drastically change the outcome of the fight. On to Mei. She got a solid upgrade this patch, just a simple 10 plus damage to her icicle with a small decrease in projectile size. Keep in mind that it's still a bigger projectile than before Season 9, so it's not like you'll be missing more shots. It's a good change, but not what Mei needs to get back to being useful. She still has serviceable utility and decent spam, and the latter has obviously gotten better now that her icicles do more damage. Unfortunately, the Kiriko Suzu nerf doesn't apply to frozen targets, but at least you can now build Blizzard more often with the extra poke damage. It's a small increase, but it definitely has an impact. Next, we have one of the biggest winners of the armor change patch, Junkrat. More and more people are noticing how he absolutely explodes tanks. His grenades are both super big and super high damage, so even though he loses at long range and his ultimate is easier to counter than ever, he's a decent pick in a lot of situations. The plus 5 damage to his primary fire in mid-season 10 allows him to 2-tap squishies, so he's actually got really good coverage. As long as it's on a map like Havana or ironically Junkrat Town, he can duel enemy DPS and kill backline effectively, and put down heavy pressure on the front line. Not bad at all considering how off meta he's always been. Next is Hanzo, pretty much the most B tier spammer there is. The Dragon Strike buff he got most recently hasn't really done anything at all. He still has good spam, his storm arrows are great for duels and bursting tanks, and he has decent ability for setting up angles and rotating quickly, but mostly, he just gets outclassed by the A tier and S tier heroes. Only his mobility is notably weaker than it should be. The leap isn't much for escaping a tank pushing their team forward, and his hitbox makes him a lot worse at winning DPS duels. He's got the damage for it, just not the sustain. It is how it is, but he's definitely in a good state. Any more buffs or nerfs are just unnecessary. He's the fairest a sniper can be in the game, especially considering he can't one-shot anymore. And for the top of B tier, it's finally Sojourn taking a break from the top tiers. Losing her high damage burst is a massive hit to her strengths, but it's definitely a reasonable nerf. In exchange for losing 30 damage on her railgun shots, they now charge faster thanks to her increased primary fire rate, and also pierce enemies all the time. not just an overclock. It's a good direction to take her in, especially considering how busted she's been for so long. She still has great range, great mobility, and decent burst. 100 damage isn't bad, but it's definitely not great, so although she won't always be viable anymore, she'll be a decent damage pick. It's about time that we see more hit-scan picks be viable besides the top 2. So now onto the fresh new A tier without Sojourn, and first we have Soldier 76, who's now clearly ahead of her. Tactical Visor still can't really compete with the top level ultimates, but his neutral is great, and his fall off range starting at 30 meters is great for farming any and all enemies from the flank. Although he's better than Sojourn now, he's still a bottom A tier hero. His sprint is good for repositioning, but not really for escaping from a dive, and his healing station still has an enormous cooldown of 18 seconds. But either way, when you want to take the game into your own hands, he's one of the best self-sustainable heroes. You can pick and choose your battles, so as long as you choose correctly, you can carry games pretty consistently. Even against dive, as long as you focus on living, you can make a massive difference between an easy win or an unavoidable loss. Following Soldier in A tier is Venture. Although it's taken a while to understand whether they're good or not, it's now pretty clear that the sheer amount of burst damage they have is enough to make them viable. Not only is Venture good at getting surprise picks, but forcing an aggressive brawl push is super easy with Burrow, and after the latest drill dash buff, you can also easily escape afterwards. Even though their range is a pretty tough weakness, it's far from being as bad as Reaper. Tragically, Cassidy's hindering grenade has just been buffed to the hindering flashbang, so if you get caught in the flank, you can just straight up die instantly with no chance to burrow, or worse, get your burrow cancelled. Venture is definitely strong enough to compete with the top heroes, but if you're not going for aggressive engage cycles, you're not going to be winning fights. So if the enemy team can poke you out before you can set up or even burst you before you can do anything, there's not much to do about it. But being one of the only heroes that has an unstoppable one-shot is always a bonus. It's why Widowmaker can still carry with 200 HP even after Season 9. Onto the more reliable Brawl Dive hybrid, it's Genji. He may not have as broken of an engage as Venture does, but his shuriken spam isn't bad at all, and ever since Dragon Blade got the fire rate increase, it's been extremely good at quickly finishing off kills. And now that it's a pretty hefty frontline spam meta, Deflect is perfect for reflecting high amounts of burst damage, blocking damage for your team, and sending it right back to the enemy. You can even waste half of Mauga's overdrive duration by deflecting damage in his face. Genji still wins a lot of duels anyway, so even though he's not great into super high spam that can force him out early, he only loses out to the top heroes or the super spammy comps. Next up is Tracer. She's by far the most affected by the armor changes since she was so consistently good, but now she's just a solid carry pick. She still has blinks and top-notch burst damage, there's just a lot more counters nowadays. The latest hero Venture is pretty good into her just based off of their primary fire alone, and right now you need to either be able to kill supports or farm tanks. Now that armor has made the tank farming a lot harder and most supports are insanely good at defending themselves, it's not the best place to be in, but people have played Tracer for so long. She's 100% viable, especially if you're playing for the objective on payload maps. Next up is the recently buffed Symmetra. Now I will admit I might be overhyping her a bit, but 25 extra health allows her to do so much more, and that's not even considering that her charge-up rate has been increased by 25%. The reason she lost the extra health in the first place was because her secondary fire had gotten to the point where she could flex between playing close and long range and still be effective. And now she has 100 damage projectiles and a fast charging beam, on top of a 300 HP teleporter. There's not much you can do about Symmetra harassing you and your team. Some of the best spam comps in the game right now definitely beat her by spamming hard, but even so, her health pool is high enough that she can really limit test and play super aggressively. When she's not especially strong, people tend to sleep on her, but now that she's extra viable, you can't forget that she melts through both shields and matrix abilities. It's going to be tough to deal with her at all ranks, so definitely give her a shot now that she's gotten back to busted health levels. Even if you totally suck at her, she has Photon Barrier. Nothing short of an EMP can stop that titan of an ultimate. Finally, at the end of A tier, it's Ashe. Luckily for her, Sojourn has been kicked out of the meta, so her mythic skin this season is totally worth getting. She's now pretty much the best long-range hit scan, and she's definitely ready to fill that role. It's really just Bob that's not the greatest into tanks like Mauga and Ram. Her Dynamite is extra valuable with the 20% heal reduction, and her reload rate has been power creeped so far that ammo management isn't even remotely difficult. And she can 2-tap headshot. Not as fast as Cassidy can, but at least she can do it at longer ranges. She may be a discount meta pick who's only fitting in because the better long-range hero isn't as good anymore, but she's good enough of a hero to be top of A tier. Now it's time for the top 3 heroes in S tier. First up is Ekko. In a spam brawl meta where everyone deals and absorbs a ton of damage, Ekko is perfect for taking advantage of any possible situation. You can spam early to force heroes out, rush a dive and just blow someone up, and control all parts of the map with your vertical and horizontal mobility. Even with hit scans looking for you, Ekko is just so good at applying constant pressure, with her short cooldowns and high burst abilities. And she's also tied for the 6th fastest charging ultimate in the game. You can win fights on your own, super consistently, so she's definitely top tier. Second in S tier is the second flyer in the game. That is until Space Ranger comes out. It's Farah, and she's pretty much finally been discovered for how broken she is. Her mobility rework has finally made her more self-sustainable. What's broken isn't that she can now dive super hard and blow up backline quickly, it's actually straight up just how much she can spam safely. Most heroes are limited by maps because of their high grounds or open space, but Farah is now great on almost every map. You just have to spam hard from safety and the enemy team will just slowly die. That's how good her rockets have gotten, with the increased fire rate and extra effectiveness against armor. And similar to how Mauga can get away from anything, with both her concussive blast and jet dash, it's really hard to catch her if she doesn't want to get caught. Finally, to really nail it in, ever since jet dash got added, her barrage has gotten way more lethal. You can definitely still die instantly. That's classic, but now that she can engage much faster, you'll be taking more enemies with you. And now for the number 1 spot, it's gotta be Cassidy. Even though he got 2 nerfs and 2 changes this patch, he's the most reliable for carrying and just being hard to deal with. The 2 nerfs he got were also just normal balancing. 5 reduced fan the hammer damage and 25% less damage reduction on his roll. He still has a survivability, raw burst damage, 2-tap pick potential, and CC. And not just any CC, but a 50% slow mobility silencing CC. And most importantly, he's really easy to get value out of. Just point and click. Everything else is just positioning and playing aggressive enough without dying. And even the nerfed 50% damage reduction on your roll will keep you alive as you kite back to safety. And when the other top tier DPS are flyers, you'll always want to hit scan to keep them at bay, and Cassidy does it perfectly. So he's sticking in S tier for a while longer. Even though his Deadeye is a bit weirder now and requires more team play, it's gonna make for some crazy plays before people get used to the new speed, so stay careful in your ranked games this early season. That's it for the DPS tier list for Season 11. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.